Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. My dad will be so grateful. See you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.
Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast, where we explore living mindfully on the path to financial independence and beyond. I'm your host, Adam Coelho, and I'm so glad you're here. On today's episode, I'm doing something a little bit different. Today, I'm joined by my dad, Val Coelho. On today's episode, my dad and I explore his backstory and how he came to the United States from Portugal at the age of 24, and how he went from working on the cruise ships, where he ultimately met my mother, to building a life in the United States, even though his original plan was to head back to Portugal after making some money to start a business. And we really dive into this idea that life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And we go on to explore how he and my mother built a business that was able to create a life of financial stability for us. And while we weren't wealthy by any means, we had a comfortable life and all of the lessons that he learned along the way. And we get my dad's thoughts on the ideas around financial independence and his advice to people early on the path. And for those interested in improving their mindset, I really enjoyed this conversation with my dad, and I hope you do as well. Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome to the podcast, Dad. So glad to have you here.
Hi, Adam. How are you? Very happy to be here and to be able to have this conversation with you.
And for those in the audience, it's also my dad's birthday today. And so happy birthday, Dad.
Thank you. Very happy to be here with you. And one more year under the belt. That just shows you how fast time goes. And
it's also my 10th anniversary at Google. And
like you said, it's your 10th anniversary with Google. And it looks like it was just yesterday that we drove there, and there you are 10 years later.
And so it's a pretty interesting day to be having this conversation. And yeah, I totally agree. It does feel like we just drove across the country, and I started work at Google, and so much has happened in both of our lives since then. So it's wild.
Yeah, time doesn't wait for anyone, and we better make the best use of it. And don't worry too much about the future or the past. Use today as the present.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to start by having you share with the audience a little bit of your backstory. You came to the United States when you were 24, and I'd love to understand a little bit about what prompted that move and kind of how you were thinking about things.
Well, like most moves, especially major moves like those, are always made out of necessity. I was born and raised in Portugal. We were doing okay. Actually, we were not well off by any means, but we had a decent life. And Avô Inácio, my father, was growing his business, and we had just gotten into some more debt by buying a second machine for the business. And that's when the revolution happened in Portugal. The whole economy stopped for a full 4 years, and that was very difficult on our business and on the business in general. And of course, that didn't help with my studies either, because I had finished high school on the year of the revolution, and then on the next 4 years that I was going to college was pretty much anarchy in the country. We had 11 provisional governments in 2 years, and it was not until 1976 that we were able to get a government that was able to govern the country for a couple of years. I was very involved in the politics of pulling for a certain party to get in power to avoid the major problems of having a Marxist government. There was a lot of nationalization of businesses, taking off property from the rightful owners, and all of that. But going back to schooling, the problem was that there was anarchy in the schools because we used to be under a dictatorship and there was no freedom. So once there was freedom, it went 180 degrees. So it was anarchy in the schools. Anytime there was a test or an exam, somebody would call in a bomb threat and the schools had to be evacuated. So my college years were pretty much for nothing because we couldn't advance. Of course, looking at it many years after, there was people that were able to advance and get their degrees. So maybe I should have applied myself a little better. So it's not just what happened, it's how I reacted to it and what I did during that time as well. But it was not good.
And so with all that going on, at what point did you make the decision, okay, I need to look for another opportunity? And how did you come across the opportunity in the United States?
Well, eventually, with all this going on, and I was very involved in the politics of electing a center-right government with at the time was called the PPD party, which is today the Social Democrats in Portugal. We were able to elect Sá Carneiro as a prime minister and that decent government that was stabilizing everything. Unfortunately, during a second campaign to elect a president from the same party, there was a bomb placed on his airplane during the campaign and they killed him. So that was pretty much what told me that it was not worth keep on banging my head against the wall when the country was in such dire straits. Eventually, I ended up being called into the army. And after doing the army service in Portugal and having a couple more jobs, I decided it would be time to come on an adventure and got a job to work on the cruise ships and came over, which of course was a lot more detailed than this. We just going over the main basics of the adventure. The idea was to come over, raise some money, raise some capital, and then go back and open a restaurant or bar. That's what I was doing at the time. I was working at a five-star hotel in Portugal. So that was the idea. But of course, like I used to tell you when you were a kid, life is what happens while you're making different plans. I end up meeting your mother, and I ended up staying here.
I am proof of that.
Right,
So
exactly.
I'd love to understand what that first day or week was like when you arrived here in this country. You know, how much money did you have? What was the plan? All of that.
Well, my trip to the United States itself was pretty funny because I ended up flying through London to come to Miami, and then I missed the plane in London, so I had to stay an extra day in London. And it was August 13, 1982. That's the day that the famous actor Henry Fonda died. I remember it because it was big news in England and over here. So the little extra money that I had to spend it in there too. So by the time I arrived in America, I had like $7 or $8 in my pocket. Arrived in Miami with a very nice white pinstripe suit and a tie and white shoes, kind of disco type attire, and got in a cab, gave them the address to the hotel, and he drove me downtown Miami to the Central American Hotel, which was probably worse than any 3-star pension that I've ever seen. And when the guy stopped in front of the hotel and he said, "Are you sure this is where you're going to go?" I said, "Is that the address I gave you?" He said, "Yeah, this is the address." So I said, "Well, let me out here." So I walked into the pension and there was this old Cuban guy, was the manager. And he looked at me and said, "What you doing in here?" In Spanish. Of course, I spoke no Spanish. I spoke Portuguese, and but I was able to understand him. And I told him I was coming to work for the cruise ship, and the guy said, "Okay, here, go put your stuff in your room and take out that stupid suit, because if you go out the street with that, they'll kill you." Keep in mind, this was just after the big Miami riots of 1980-81, when the police had, the Colombian police guy had shot one of the residents down in Liberty City. So the city had just been burned quite a bit. So that was my arrival in Miami.
And so as you're arriving in the United States, what is your plan? What are you thinking that, how you're going to approach things going forward? You have $7 in your pocket. How do you go from there?
Well, this is a funny story, because in the last year I was in Portugal. I was a bartender, and people were coming to me to go open bars for them. Guys say, "Listen, I have some money. I want to open a bar in there. I don't know anything about it, but you have been recommended that you know what you're doing, and I would like you to come to work for me and open the bar." So I opened 2 private bars, and then I went to open the bar at the 5-star Atlantis back then. On the last job at the Atlantis, we worked like 7 days, grand inauguration with people from all over the world. This was a 5-star hotel that had been, the structure was almost complete when we had the revolution in 74, and the hotel was not open until 1982. But when it was open, it was grandiose. And so we were working almost around the clock during the inauguration. Me being a head bartender, we had to serve breakfast and lunch and dinner and the late night drinks and everything. And then when the payroll came, the hotel, which today would be human resources, paid overtime to the people in the dining room and did not pay overtime to the people in the bars. And that was really what set me off and said, I got enough of this. So I remember at the time that at one of the previous bars that had opened, a friend of a friend had said that he had this letter that he could take to the U.S. Embassy to ask for a work visa to work on a cruise ship. But because the cruise ships didn't guarantee him a salary, he would not do it. He was not going to do it because they only got paid in tips. So I said, well, let me see if I can find this guy. So I called a friend of the friend, and they got me the letter. I wrote the letter in broken English to the Apollo Ship Chandlers in Miami, which was the company that catering exploration on Carnival before Carnival got really big. And they sent me a letter to go ask for a visa and to come. So when I came to go work on the cruise ship. I didn't come to the United States. I came to the United States to go work on a cruise ship, which was not a visa to be ashore, was only good to be a seaman's visa. But I had something to do, so I did not come without a job in mind. Funny thing is, when I got to that same hotel in Miami, then the ship that I was coming to work in didn't have room for me, so we had to wait 3 or 4 days. Then they told us that there was room in a ship in New York. So since I was the only one that spoke a little English, they put 4 of us on an airplane. Back then we still had Eastern, so we flew on Eastern from Miami to New York to go join the Britannies in New York. And I was already the head of the class, being the one representing and talking for those other 3 that were with me, because they were from Central America and they spoke no English whatsoever. So we joined the ship in New York, and then the first cruise I made was from New York to the Bermuda, which was beautiful.
Very cool. Very cool. That's a great story.
You make all of these plans. You think I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then, you can imagine how it was to leave your country at 24, where you had all your friends, all your family, and leave not only, like many Portuguese did during the dictatorship, to France and Germany and England, but to live and move clear across an ocean in a time in which there was no social media, there was very little international lines of communication, and in Europe that was pretty much controlled through commerce with England. England, before the common market as we know it today, England controlled a lot of the commerce into Europe, especially from the United States. Everything that went from here went through England before it made it to mainland Europe. So we making a phone call. To make a phone call for 5 minutes was $10-20 on a payphone, putting coins in it to call once a month to talk with your mother or your sister. So that was totally different. But life is what you make of it.
Yeah.
We can look at the fact that my idea of coming here was to try to get some money, work hard on the cruise ships, and because at the time the difference in between the dollar and the escudo, which was the currency of Portugal, was quite large. By working here for a couple of years, I would have been able to go back and get in my own bar or something like that, which at the time Portugal was just coming back from the 4 years that we stopped for the revolution, and like from 1982, 83 to 1995, there was a big boom in tourism in Portugal, and people that opened bars and restaurants made out very well with all of that. Of course, I came here, then I ended up meeting your mother. We fell in love and we ended up getting married, and I stayed.
So it sounds like you came here with the intention of staying a few years, making some money, and heading back to Portugal to open a bar because that's what you had been working in before. Life had other plans for you. I find it interesting to reflect on this now as well, because I thought I'd move out to California, work for Google for 2 years, then go off, work for a startup or something, and then build my own business as well. Obviously, 10 years in, that hasn't happened. So life had different plans for me as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that idea that life is what happens when you're making other plans, and how that played out in your life.
What I was trying to remember was that after coming in here and working on the cruise ships, when I finally got vacation, I went and took 6 weeks time vacation and went to Portugal to visit the family and to visit friends and whatnot. What you realize is that once you leave, the world doesn't stop. You remember things as they were, but your friends, your family, the place itself moves on. Just because you left, it doesn't stop. It's like there is a Brazilian song that goes, to live is to die a little bit, because you get separated from the reality that you had. So after 3 weeks in Portugal, on my vacation, I said, wow, I don't fit into this place like I used to, and it's too slow, and I'm used to be running around. I'm going to go back. So I just went to the travel agency at the time. You did everything through travel agencies. There was no kayak or nothing like that. And I rebooked my ticket 2 weeks earlier to come back. And that's how I came back sooner than I expected. And start looking maybe at making a living in here. And of course, your mother convinced me of that. And that's how we started. The two of us got married, and I got a job at a restaurant because that was what I knew and what I had a good background on. I tried to be a manager, and I was a manager at two different restaurants, but I realized that it was just for most of the jobs in management, in which is considered retail. Restaurant is no more than retail in this country. Those are just jobs in which you are being exploited by the hours you work. By being a manager, you don't get paid extra time or anything. You just have the title of manager with a promise of promotion and whatnot, and you are working countless hours, not getting the benefits of it. So after that was clear to me, your mother told me that probably I should look for a job like with UPS, which I did. And once I got hired, I stayed in there for 14 years because of the benefits, the salary, the weekends off that allowed me time to be with the family, which you never had in the restaurant business. So that was a great compromise. And I mean a compromise because I really had hospitality in my blood. And I'm very people friendly. I like to talk a lot with people, listen to their ideas, tell stories, listen to other people's perspectives. So that was one of the things that really drove me to the restaurant and bar business. By working with UPS, we were able to get the security and the benefits to start a family and to have you and your brother.
Yeah. And so you did that for 14 years, much of my early childhood. You were doing that very physical labor, obviously, delivering packages, but it gave us the security and insurance and all of that, and allowed you to be home with us on the weekends. Where did things go from there?
Both your mother and I, we always had this entrepreneurial spirit. We kept on trying a couple of different things, and I made a couple of tries at a couple of different businesses that were utterly failures, but kept on learning from it. And finally, your mother got it into their head that she wanted to open an assisted living facility. And the fun part of it is that when we went to Vegas on vacation, we actually went there also to look at the Vegas area, if it would be something that would be willing to move to, because at the time, Vegas was just about to explode. During this vacation, I don't know if you remember, you're pretty young, was the four of us and Aunt Michelle and Grandma. We went to Vegas, we went to the Grand Canyon, we went to LA and San Diego. So it was a nice vacation, but the refrain of that vacation was your mother saying, when I go back, I will open an assisted living facility. I'm going to buy a house and open an assisted living facility. And the fun part of it is that we came back, and on September 15th, we put money down on a house. And in October, we had a facility that was being licensed, and we opened our first assisted living facility. Those were struggling times. We worked very hard. I was working there, putting the facility together, doing a lot of assembling furniture, cleaning, painting, blah, blah, blah. And very difficult to get the first resident, which we finally did, little Pearl, God bless her heart. So finally, around April, I believe, we finally were making enough money at the facility that we were not having to put every cent from our paychecks into it. And I thought to myself, boy, I'm able to breathe now, thank God. And your mother goes and tells me, I found this facility, I'm going to buy it. I said, honey, we just opened this and we finally got enough people to breathe. And she says, nope, there is one for sale. We're going to have to go buy it. We're going to have to go buy it, figure out what we're going to do. We're going to have to go buy it. I said, I don't know how to go buy it. And she says, we'll figure it out. So she found this place that we still own today, Bright Horizons of Coral Springs. And June 9th, 1999, we bought a second facility. There we are, cleaning it up, making it up to our standards, putting our, our border on top of the wall, close to the ceiling, like the signature of Bright Horizons. I told your mother, listen, I cannot keep on working these hours for UPS and working these facilities. I'm running myself to the ground in here. If we're going to do this, what we're going to do is buy a third one. And so I can quit my job and work this full time with you. And she said, well, let's see what we can do. And November of 1999, we did buy another house in the Dalles, and we got Bright Horizons of North Springs. I gave notice on January, first week of January 2000. I gave notice at UPS and start working Bright Horizons full time.
Wow. So how fast was it from the first one to the third one?
We got from 0 facilities to 3 facilities in 1 year. And
in
then,
1 year? Wow.
In 1 year. We got Bright Horizons of Sunrise, that was an empty house, in 1998. And then in June of 1999, we got Rousseau, that became Bright Horizons of Coral Springs, that was already licensed, but had 1 or 2 residents, I believe 1 resident. And it was, pretty dungy at that sectional couch that we call the bus. And we got that one. And then later that year, we had a couple of people that wanted a place, and we didn't have a place for them. So we got the house in the Dalles, prepared it for an assisted living facility, and I believe we had the first resident in there till in 1999, and then in 2000 we were full again. So we had 3 the first year, then we stabilized for a little bit. In 2001, we bought Bright Horizons of Greenwood. In 2002, we bought the house for Ramblewood, and we retrofitted it to be Bright Horizons of Ramblewood in 2002. And then in 2003, we bought Bel Air, and it became Bright Horizons of Wallaby. So from the end of 1998 to 2003, we got 6 facilities and 44 residents. By having created these businesses and having quit UPS, I was able to be home with you guys and be home every day when you guys came back from school. And we had dinner together for all those years. And I saw you guys through your teenage years. Never had a problem with you guys. And I guess most of it was probably because we were able to have dinner together and be a close unit family. Of course, you probably remember having to go take some landscaping and working at the facilities here and there with me, which was a good lesson for you as well.
Absolutely. I certainly do remember that, but even didn't realize that it happened so quickly.
Right.
That within 5 years, you went from working at UPS and mom was doing therapy to having 6 facilities. I didn't realize it was so fast. And also I do remember that trip to the Grand Canyon and very vividly remember Mom in the minivan or whatever we had talking about that at the edge of the Grand Canyon, saying, I'm going to start a facility. And everyone was like, oh, you're crazy. You're not going to, that's a good idea, but who knows what. And then it just came very quickly after that. It just happened.
Right. That's your mother. When she puts her head to something, there is no turning around. She'll go until she gets it done.
That's true. Let's shift gears now into what I call the Mindful Fire Final Four. And the first question is, what is one thing that you're extremely grateful for?
First and foremost, I'm very grateful for my health. I've been very lucky for all the crazy things that I have done and everything I've done in my life. My health has been pretty good, and I have never broken a bone in my body, thank God. That's first and foremost what I'm most grateful for to start with. Of course, I'm very grateful for my family, my whole family, and in particularly my close family, you and your brother, your mother, and now my grandson and the spouses of my sons. I think that it's so important that both of you guys have spouses and are pretty much in a stable relationships in your lives. And I'm very proud and very grateful for that. That brings me peace of mind and joy. It's a great gift to be able to look into the future knowing that you guys are pretty much set and I don't have to worry about your futures.
Well, thank you. I'm very grateful for you and Mom as well, and for our entire family. The second question is, what advice would you give to someone early on their path to financial independence?
Well, I would think that one of the best things that you can do for your financial independence is to look at what's out there that is sustainable, that you can make good living at, that you can make a difference in. Choose something that you think that you can do and educate yourself about it. Study about it. If you need to go to school, learn about it. We all make excuses, but we all have 24 hours a day. If what you're doing right now doesn't satisfy you, if you're starting a career, don't just jump into something to have a job. Have a job, but look around, see what it is that you could do that could make you happy and could be financially rewarding for yourself, and do it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And while I know that you don't have a regular meditation practice per se, what advice would you give to someone getting started with mindfulness or training their mind and thinking about their mindset to approach life with?
Again, like I told you before, I have for many, many years known about meditation and breathing techniques and all of that. I should have probably looked into it further. That's one of the things that we probably could notice, that sometimes we don't look deep enough into opportunities that present themselves to us. From all that I've been reading and learning lately, it looks like meditation has been a great catalyst of success for a great number of people, be it just meditation itself or be the power to concentrate on specific techniques or whatever you want to call it. But it looks like many people have done it and use it very successful for their careers and for their well-being. So probably something that people should take a good look at and continue with, give it the good old try before just giving up on it. There is evidence that there is big advantages of being a practitioner.
Very good. And the last question is, Throughout my life, you've used this phrase, what other people think of me is none of my business. And I heard that many, many times, but it wasn't until I was like 25 when that really sunk in. Can you talk a little bit about that philosophy and kind of the dangers of worrying too much about what other people think of you?
There is very well recorded opinions and sayings throughout history. If we go back the Ten Commandments, the sayings of Confucius, the people's proverbs, there is all sorts of things that humanity have collected, and some of them have become proverbs, some have become puns, some whatever you want to call it. So there is the seven deadly sins, gluttony, envy, lust, whatever. So all of these things exist because they have been proven that they can have an effect on our life, especially if you don't pay attention to them or if you are ignorant of them. Envy is one of the worst deadly sins, and that's because people can have envy of you and say things about you or what you're trying to do that have nothing to do with reality. And if you believe it, they're going to affect your judgment, what you do or what you don't do, because somebody else put things in your mind without knowing at all what was it that you were trying to do. If you say, I'm going to start this business, many people that will comment on it have no idea about the business that you're going to start, but they'll have an opinion about it and they can ruin your plan by putting doubts into your thinking. On the other hand, if you are envious of somebody, you spending your time envying the person for what they have and for what they achieve instead of trying to see why is it that they have what they have and what they achieved, and try to put the same effort into yourself to try to achieve something. And that goes to comparisons. So if you're trying to make a living on whatever and you compare yourself with others all the time, comparison is good if you want to see where you are on the scale. But if you constantly compare yourself to others on what you have and what they have, then there's always going to be somebody that has more than you. There's going to be somebody that is stronger than you, that is prettier than you. So it's just demoralizing if you go down that avenue. The best thing, and that goes back to the first letter, the first idea of financial independence. What financial independence gives you is security and self-esteem. Okay? When you have financial independence, now you feel like you are secure and your self-esteem goes up. What you think about me is none of my business. It's really about you keeping your self-esteem and knowing your self-worth and do what you're gonna do and prove to other people that might have doubts about you wrong. But first do it and then tell them. Don't tell them and then try to do it. You do what you need to do, and then the doubters will see that you could do it.
Yeah, it's one that really stands out to me because for a long time, like without even realizing it, I was and to some degree still am just trying to like gain approval from people to show them that I'm doing things right or that I'm smart or that I know this, right? And it could be for a number of reasons, school, it's kind of like the whole thing is set up for that. And as a striver in school, I was always trying to, look smart and get good grades and things like that. But regardless, right? Like it just is such a waste of energy to worry about what other people are thinking of you or how someone might react if you try something different. Because the reality is also they probably are not even thinking of you at all. And so all of that mental energy is really just a waste of energy that I could be putting into doing the thing that I think would be interesting to try. And
Right.
so,
All of those things are also part of the way that we raised you. Being Portuguese and have Portuguese blood, there is always that little hint of perfectionism. You have to try to be perfect. And that is one of my biggest defects, is always trying to have things done the way I think it's right. And I probably passed it down to you. But I hope that you can drop it back, and that some of the baggage that we carry, it's what slows us down. It's the story of the monk that I probably told you, and we wouldn't finish this without me having some sort of a story. The two monks got to the creek that was overflowing, and there was a girl in there to cross with them. And one of the monks said, "You want to go to the other side? I'll pick you up and I'll carry you." And she said, "Okay, that would be great." So the monk picked her up on his back, carried her to the other side of the creek. The other monk came too, and he put the girl down. The girl went about her life, and the two monks walked down, and they were just not talking. And finally, the monk said, "I can't believe you do that." And the one that carried the girl said, "I did what?" "That you picked up the girl and you carried her to the other side of the creek. That's not what monks do." And he said, "Well, I put the girl down right on the other side of the creek, but you are still carrying her on your back."
yeah, it's a great point. We carry a lot of baggage from big things or small things, but it's really helpful to just ask the question, is this useful? Right? That's something that I try to practice, is if I'm ruminating about something that happened that didn't go well or whatever, just like, the first few times it might be useful, but like the 37th time I'm going over this in my head, it's not useful. Right? So I can just set it down and keep walking forward.
Absolutely. And, I wish I could tell you how to drop those things, but I do carry a few of them myself. And, once in a while you are doing something, and some stuff that happened 30, 40 years ago creeps into your mind, and you're still recriminating yourself about it. So just, if you can, when they come to your mind, just say, "I learned the lesson," and goodbye.
Yep, absolutely. Dad, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks a lot.
It's been my pleasure. I hope you can use some of this stuff, if not for your podcast, at least for our relationship. Know that I love you and that I admire you for everything you have done and that you are doing. And I love you and your family.
Thank you so much, Dad, for being with me here today on the Mindful Fire podcast.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Mindful Fire podcast. If you got value from the episode, please hit subscribe. This just lets the platforms know you're getting value from the episodes and you'd like to be here when we produce additional content. And if you're getting value from the show, we'd love it if you could share it with a friend or two who might get value from the content. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, we'd really appreciate if you could leave a 5-star review. This just lets more people find out about the message of mindfulness and financial independence. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.